Right.
It's the crowd. There's a lot of people in the room. That's
Bobby Neal.
We would like to call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting on March 18, 2014. Can they hear that?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
We'd like to call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting March 18th, 2014. If you would, please stand with us and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, I'd like to introduce the board members, starting on my right.
Nancy Plesnarski.
Gary Willis
Christopher Bluer.
Rita Young.
and Walt Recook will be here in just a minute or two. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-legal board composed of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with the hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determinations. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief if granted would not cause substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. Are there any adoptions or amendments to tonight's agenda? If none, we need to
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
approve the February meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve February 2014 meeting minutes as submitted.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of passing the February 2014 meeting minutes, raise your right hand.
I was not here. I need to abstain.
We have 3 yeses and Rita Young abstained. Our first variance is V13-014, 980 Mayfield Road, the Lakes of Mayfield Planners. Angela, will you please present?
Mr. Chair, actually, staff would like to request that this variance be withdrawn. We've received a letter requesting this withdrawal from the applicant. The applicant reworked their project so that the variance was not required.
Okay. Do we need to make a motion for that since they're the ones that...
Since it came late, please, you can motion.
Sure. We need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to withdraw V13-014.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have any discussion? All in favor of allowing the withdrawal of V13-014, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Next variance is V14-011, southwest corner of Hopewell Road and Cogbird Road. Angela, will you please present?
Just for clarity, I believe you misspoke. It's V14001 as opposed to 11.
Oh, sorry, 001.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to request a withdrawal of this variance also. The applicant, again, was able to work the project so that the requested variance is no longer required.
Do we have a motion to withdraw?
I'll make motion to withdraw V14-001.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of withdrawal of V14-001, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. That passed unanimously. Next variance is V14-002, 14735, 14737 Wood Road. Angela, would you please present?
Yes, sir. The site, 14735 and 14737, consists of 5 acres of land, zone AG1. The property includes a single-family home, a barn, a small shed, and fenced pasture land. It is the home of Phoebe Lockery Stables, a show barn, and horse training facility. The owners, William and Phoebe Lockery, purchased the 5-acre property in December of 2000. Mrs. Lockery stated that their 5 acres was originally part of a larger parcel, which was subdivided with the stream as a boundary line. This subdivision, as approved by Fulton County, placed the two original barn structures in the rear setback. In 2005, Fulton County stream buffer rules changed, adding an additional 25-foot stream buffer and a 25-foot impervious setback. Milton adopted these rules upon the creation of the city in 2007, and they can be found in Section 20-425. These actions created a non-conforming structure. According to Section 64742A of the City of Milton zoning ordinance, a non-conforming structure may remain as long as it is not enlarged, increased, or extended, etc. Once it is altered, it must comply with current zoning regulations. The rules for non-conforming structures were the same under Fulton County. In February of 2013, the city received a complaint stating that the Lockerys were performing building activities without the required building permit. The city's building official, Wade Green, performed a site visit on February 20th, 2013, confirmed the ongoing work, and issued a stop work order. The Lockerys had joined the 2 separate barn structures into one U-shaped structure. Section 1086 requires a building permit for any new construction, including enlarging or altering a structure. See attached picture dated 2/26/13 and the Google Earth images. Mr. Green sent Mr. Lockery a letter requesting that he obtain a building permit as well as the business license for the show barn. The business license has since been obtained. In February 2013, Mr. Lockery applied for a building permit for the work on the barn. The application did not include the required site plan, and staff sent him a letter requesting this. The attached letter dated June 21st, 2013. The site plan that the Lockerys submitted in response did not reflect current conditions on the site, and staff requested an accurate plan. The revised site plan was received in August of 2013. Staff then sent a letter to Mr. Lockery informing him of the problems with the location of the barn and that he would need to obtain a variance before the building permit could be issued. See attached letter dated August 16, 2013. In 2012, the city revised the zoning ordinance to require that all structures housing animals be located at least 100 feet from all property lines. Again, if no changes had been made to the existing structures, the city would not have an issue with the barn. Once changes were made to the barn, it became non-conforming. If the additions made to the barn were removed, the legal non-conforming use would be allowed to continue, but no building permits can be issued that would add to the non-conformity. Because the Lowry's barn is closer than 100 feet from the side and property lines, for Section 64415A, a variance is required. Section 64416D states that the minimum rear yard is 50 feet, and Section 64416C1 states that the minimum side yard is 25 feet. Section 64416I states that accessory structures cannot be located in a minimum yard. Because the barn, which is considered an accessory structure, is located in both the side and rear setbacks, a variance is required. Also, the Lockerys are requesting a variance to allow the existing accessory structure, a small stable, to remain in the side setback. It is located directly on the eastern property line. It is in violation of Section 64416I, which states that accessory structures cannot be located in a minimum yard. Therefore, a variance is required for this structure. Design Review Board courtesy review, the meeting which was held on February 4th, 2014, the DRB offered the following comments. Obtain letters of support from the neighbors, consider adding screening to the rear of the barn, and consider closing off the back of the barn so that the horses do not overhang the adjacent property. Staff held a focus meeting on February 5th, 2014, at which time the following comments were provided. Building plan review, no comments, but please see attached letters. Site plan review, no comments other than please see attached letters. Arborist, DOT, stormwater, no comments. The standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows. The barn structure is positioned in such a way that the road and the surrounding properties have the most minimal view of the barn compared to any other viable barn location on this property. The barn predates the homes on adjacent properties that do have a view of the barn, such that the builder owner of these properties would have been aware of a neighboring barn when purchasing and building on the adjacent properties. Moving the barn beyond the setbacks would be a greater detriment to the adjacent properties than alterations to the existing barn. The barn in another location would be visible from the road and from adjacent properties and would require grading and construction that would be visually unappealing and create noise affecting the adjacent properties. Thus, granting the variance for renovation in addition to the existing structure would be more in the spirit of the ordinance than the new construction would be. Strict application of the ordinance would require hardship due to the topography of the property. The current barn sits on a relatively flat area at the back of the property. The property sits on the side of a hill with the house at the highest point and the land running down the hill at varying grades in all directions from the house. Some areas are so steep that the grade creates unusable space. The only viable alternate location for a barn on my property would require significant construction expense and would take up valuable pasture land that my business cannot afford to lose. Losing pasture space would be a detriment to the mental and physical health of the horses and would also be a hardship to the property by putting more stress on the remaining pasture land. I believe that the public good is better served by the granting of the variance because it is in the spirit of Milton as a horse-friendly community. Allowing me to make improvement to the existing barn and maintain my pasture space helps to maintain the picturesque landscape of Wood Road for other residents and those who use the road for recreation. The additions and renovation requested for the legal non-conforming barn allow the property to remain the most similar to its long-standing use and condition, while providing the space my business requires without overburdening the property or detracting from the surrounding properties. Allowing renovation and minor additions to the current barn structure would be a just result for both my business, the neighboring properties, and for Milton as a community. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Obtain the required building permits. Neither the barn nor the small stable can be enlarged from their current footprint. No further disturbance in the stream buffer. This concludes the staff presentation, and just for the board's information, we have the city arborist and the city engineer here with us this evening in case there are any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board to staff?
Mr. May I?
Yes, sir.
So, you said, I'm sorry, who's here from the city, Angela?
We have the director, we have arborist, and the city engineer.
The city engineer, can I just ask some questions related to this,
Okay.
the buffer? Hi, thank you. I just wanted some clarification as it relates to the stream buffer and the flow of that. That that is flowing away from the neighborhoods, so that anything that were to, whether it was animal waste or anything that, any type of land that were to flow down to that stream, where's that going?
There may be a portion of the existing building that sheds toward the stream buffer, but the new part that is built is in front of that, so it would shed off toward the front of the property.
So it shed off, so there wouldn't be a significant impact on that stream buffer based on how the flow of the land is?
Well, as long as it was separated to where the horses couldn't get behind the structure, that would be true, as far as runoff from any animal activity.
Okay.
Keep in mind that there was an original structure that was there, that was added onto, that part probably does shed some water toward the buffer, but the other structure's in front of that.
The letter that we received from the neighborhood, White Columns, that expressed some initial concerns, and they were doing some due diligence, do they have a reason to be concerned?
I don't think so, because the lake in question is, this property shouldn't have any impact to any, or cause any detriment to the lake, because it's actually on a side tributary that goes into the stream basin that drains out of the lake, so it's actually not directly in that tributary.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir.
I have one question while you're here. Is the stream filled with water 365 days a year, or is there only water in it after rain?
The stream we're talking about, we believe it to be intermittent, which means that it may not flow entirely year-round, but there is some base flow identified, so it would therefore be required to have a state buffer.
Thank you. Any other questions for?
No, not this time.
Thank you very much. Any other questions to the board? At this time, we'd like to invite the applicant up front to present, and if you would state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Phoebe Lockery, 14735 Wood Road, Alpharetta, Georgia, Milton, Georgia. Do you want me to talk?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Please.
Sorry. Actually did a PowerPoint. I have letters from neighbors as well, but I'll just start with, she's going to put a PowerPoint presentation up, I
We
think.
have it up here too, just so that you know.
Mrs. Luckery, while we're waiting, may we review the letters, please?
Sure.
Here you go.
Go ahead, ma'am, when you're
It's
ready.
okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you ready, Angela?
Go ahead, start.
I'm just waiting for the first slide. Sorry. Here we go. So there's the front of the barn. You can't really see that from Wood Road. That's from my house. And then the next slide. The part that's in question, if you want to go back one, I'm sorry, is the tall part. Okay, go ahead now, Angela. That's the pasture, the horse. Go ahead, Angela. This is a neighbor's farm, not my own, that you can view from Wood Road. Go ahead, Angela. This is my my pasture that you can view from Wood Road. And again, what you view from Wood Road. And again from Wood Road. This is the entrance to the barn. The addition's the left part. We just put a roof over to connect the two parts. Okay. This again is a neighboring farm's view from Wood Road, but not our own. Again, another picture of our pasture. All right, the blue is the non-conforming legal structure. The green is the addition. The addition is 62 feet from the property line versus the existing building that's always been there. Okay, go ahead, Angela. These are Georgia laws controlling soil erosion and sediment. They're two separate laws concerning the variance, stream buffering. These are agricultural laws that protect farms that are in operation, as myself. Stream buffering. This does not include building of subdivisions. This is just agriculture. Stream buffering, the state law exempts agricultural operations, including the construction of farm buildings, from stream buffering and other requirements under the Georgia Soil Erosion and Sedimentation Act. No permit can be required for these exempt activities. I'm not arguing with the property line or anything. I'm just saying that some of these things are okay. Okay, go ahead. And for one of the reasons that they have that for the creeks and stuff is because for agricultural use. We lease a field and our horses drink out of the stream, so that's a classic reason for agricultural uses, that you'd still need to get to streams, et cetera. It's just a picture of the natural use of the animal husbandry there. Can you guys see all this? Mm-hmm. And this is the other law. It just says the purposes of this code section is to reduce losses of the state's lands and resources by limiting the circumstances under which agricultural facilities and operations of agricultural support facilities may be deemed nuisances. And I think what they're trying to say there is that in protecting farmland, we protect our resources. And it says no agricultural facility shall become a nuisance, either public or private, as a result of a changed conditions in or around the locality of such facility or operation, if the facility or operation has been in operation for 1 year or more, on changed conditions to include urban sprawl or in or around the facility or operation. And I think we're talking about the new houses that come in around farms. And this is the berm that I have put up at my own expense along my property line. I have already done that at a great expense to do that, and that's a picture of that. Those are the tall grasses cut down on those little squares, but it goes all the way down the property line. I think that's it. Do you want to ask me any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Questions to the applicant from the board. Yes, sir.
I went out to your site the very next day after the meeting last week and saw where your sign was posted. One of the main reasons you were delayed was because the sign was not posted correctly. Can you please tell me where that sign was posted?
It was posted on the, we have a gate with a lot of shrubs, and so it's the left side of the gate. And we did move it down the road so it's in the middle of the fence.
So you don't think it perhaps was hidden behind some shrubs?
Well, we had it there, the reason that actually the last time it was, I lost track of my dates, and I didn't realize that it was that day. So I was concerned because I thought it was 14/7/35, so I had it at the house, and we just have a lot of shrubs around the entrance gate. So we moved it down the road where you could see it better on Wood Road.
I wish I could show pictures to the audience where that sign was posted to show how I felt. It was almost blatant to hide that sign so the public couldn't see it.
I'm sorry about that. It wasn't that. I just thought it had to be at 14/7/37, and so it would be clear. We have a lot of, and I sent pictures to Angela showing that we have shrubs to the left, we have shrubs to the right, and I was afraid to put it behind a tree. There's a tree that was a little bit clearer, but then you may not have been able to see it. But she said it didn't matter. It could be at the farm, so we moved it down the road.
You have a beautiful sign saying what your stables are, which can very easily be seen. You couldn't have posted on that same post so everyone could see it?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. We did move it.
All right, second question.
We did move it.
Okay, second
You
question.
also have to remember, like, I'm out of town every weekend, and tomorrow I leave again for 5 days, and And I'm sorry if I needed to move that sooner. It was not intentional.
Okay. Second question, you showed us a picture of what you thought was the area in which you built onto the stables. It looks like it was a little bit more that was actually built than what you actually have shown in the green. Can we go to that picture?
There is the tall building that you may see in an earlier picture ends and didn't connect to the barn. So we put a piece of roof on a small part of this green section that connected it, as well as on the front.
So in other words, if I'm looking at this picture, the portion that's parallel to the property line, that was not added?
No, it's on the back part is the property line. The side part is where the addition is that's in question.
I understand that. I'm looking at your drawing. It shows property line, and I'm seeing a blue section of the barn that if I look at Google Earth and I look at old pictures, it shows that, you know, the right-hand side, I agree, was probably built. That side that's parallel to that property line looks like that was added onto, as well as the portion that's perpendicular that has the green. Just asking.
Well, if I took away a little part of that blue where the roof connects it, it does loop around. You're right.
Okay. There's more green than probably is there. Number
I just
three,
did that myself with
you've got
PowerPoint an hour ago,
bathroom
so.
That's in this building, is that correct?
Pardon?
There's a bathroom in this stable area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Whereabouts is a bathroom?
It was in the original building. It was a storage room that was plumbed in for plumbing.
Okay. So you have health department approval for that septic field that goes for that bathroom?
Well, it's always been there, and I called the septic.
That's not the question.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. When we began to use it, I called the guy that did all of our, whenever we built a house or anything, and he put a septic tank in and stuff for us, and he'd come and dig the ground and make sure it was okay, right? And he said, Phoebe, as long as it doesn't smell, it's not leaking, don't worry, you're going to be fine.
Well, one of my concerns, of course, is I'm concerned about water quality and health as in the area. And I just want to make sure that if we have stables and they've got bathrooms, which I hope they all do, that they're being done on the proper code, no different than having a building permit. And the last thing is, we have something here about the code about stream buffer, about no permit. I think what you're referring to under that section, it's a no land disturbance permit or no construction permit for erosion control. But that does not apply to building permits. My question to you is, why was no building permit gotten for this property?
Well, if you have a farm, it's pretty much common practice to add on stalls. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, okay? But I would say probably about 95% of most existing equestrian facilities add on stalls without building permits, all right? It's a custom that people have been doing for a long time. We have applied for a building permit. So I'm not inferring that you don't need a building permit. I was just talking about the stream buffering and things like that.
I just want to be clear to everyone what that no permits referencing, and I'll ask the staff for confirmation to that effect so that it's not assumed that it's not a no building permit. But I think that's important that we have an obligation as a community member, as you are, to follow the rules. And I think it's important that we do that. Lastly, you've given us a couple letters from owners of properties. Are any of these folks adjoining your property?
No. I have two adjoining neighbors that I asked, and they said that the problem is that Mr. Stone has sent them 25, 35, 50 pages over and over again. They say, we are not going to come and complain. We don't have a problem with it, but we don't want to get in the middle of this. They feel it's an argument between two neighbors.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sir. Ma'am, one of your points in the letter that you wrote was that if you were forced to relocate the barn, you would lose valuable pasture land.
Yes.
Help me understand. I understand the expense of moving the barn, but putting that off to the side for a moment, if you were to move the barn from point A to a new point B, how would you lose pasture land there if that pasture land were recreated where the barn used to be?
It takes sometimes 10 to 15 years to establish good pasture in Georgia. I had a different property, and I cleared 7 acres. I don't even think today, and that was 25 years ago, it's got good pasture. It just takes forever. It tends to be very clay, it isn't good. If I had to, that's one of the reasons I bought the property, because it had established pasture.
Right, okay. You also spoke about the spirit of the ordinance, because Milton's a horse community, that you felt that you weren't in violation because of that. Can you just expand on your thoughts on that a little bit for me?
Can you read that to me exactly, what was said there?
Can I borrow your document?
Yes. Are you talking about this?
Yep. If you'll bear with me, if somebody else has a question, I'll come back to it, ma'am, in a moment. If somebody else, sir.
It's right here. I think that's where he's going.
Can you
What page are you on?
What page?
Page 5, the second to last
Second
paragraph.
last paragraph.
Ma'am, this is from your letter.
Yep.
I believe that the public good is better served by granting of the variance because it is in the spirit of Milton as a horse-friendly community. Allowing me to make improvements to the existing barn and maintain my pasture space helps to maintain the picturesque, landscape of Wood Road for other residents and those who use the road for recreation.
And your question is?
My question is that Milton certainly was created with more of a rural atmosphere. But are you suggesting that because you have horses, that there should be a separate set of rules that are associated with those?
No.
That?
I'm just saying let's preserve rural Milton, and the way you're going to preserve rural Milton is to have horse farms. And sometimes it isn't, I do everything I can to make it beautiful, but
Sure.
It's an agricultural use. Sometimes you're going to have horse poop, cow poop. I'm sorry.
You can't avoid it. No, I
You
get
can't
it.
avoid it. So, I do have some protection, in that sense, and I think all farmers do, and they have it because this is what happens. You have farms, and then, the land starts to sell off, and houses come in, et cetera, and it can be a very difficult. If you have an agribusiness, it can be extremely difficult. We've had to resurvey our land. When you said there was a delay in a letter, well, that's because we had to resurvey our land at a high cost. We had to hire an attorney. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions for the applicant? Yes, sir.
You mentioned something that really is not a good standard practice for agricultural use, and I just want to make sure you know this, and if we've got any other horse people in the community that are here, that they know it as well. Drinking out of a creek or stream is not proper means in which animals should be watered. In fact, under the Soil Water Conservation Commission as well as Agricultural Department, they actually request farmers to actually fence off these streams to keep animals from degrading the banks and streams of those creeks. So it's very common that these things get fenced. In fact, there's actually programs in which the NRCS actually funds farmers for doing that. If you'd like to know more information, I am a district supervisor with the Soil Water Conservation Commission for Fulton County. I'll be glad to provide you that information.
Well, you
But
probably
that's
know more
not
than
a
I
good
do.
practice. So if you are doing that, please stop it.
Well, I just called the Department of Agriculture, and they sent me this information.
I think it's great, but I think, again, the actual watering of animals in a creek and stream is not good practice.
Any other questions to the applicant?
No.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to open the floor for any public comment. Yes. As you come forward, please state your name and address to the board, and have you filled out a form?
I have not.
If you'll do that as soon as you get done and give it to Angela, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Jerry Saraciti. I'm from 14775 Wood Road. I'm not so sure that a lot of this would be such a big issue if that a lot of this from the very beginning hadn't been done under the cloak of night. From the very beginning when the ring went in, the ring went in over the weekend real quickly without the silt fence, and then all of a sudden the silt fence went up, And then the barns went in way in the back of the property where nobody knew anything was going on. And it just seemed like we were trying to avoid a lot of people knowing what was going on. And it just didn't seem kosher. And it hit us all on the street as not being kosher. Listen, we live in a Wood Road, you know, is a dirt road, and we're all kind of we really want to get together. We really like each other. We really try to do for each other. And that just didn't fit what we do on that road. We want to help each other. That silt in that stream hurt me tremendously to see silt falling into that stream. I don't know that silt falling into a stream is a good thing. It didn't seem it to me. You know, so if we could just, I mean, sure, we all need to grow. Sure, we all need to have a business. It was a tough time. This was happening when we were all taking a big hit financially. But if we're going to do it, let's do it the right way. That's all.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
How close is your property to the applicant's property?
There is one house away.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Sure. Where do I need to fill out?
Any other public comment? Okay. At this time, the applicant has the opportunity to come back and represent or any type of rebuttal that you'd like to say, or a closing argument.
Thank you. The gentleman that just came up is the partner of somebody that has a competing equestrian business on the same road. And the pictures of the pastures I showed you before is their farm. And also, we've done a research of all building permits on Wood Road. Not one barn has asked for an extension of a building permit or added stalls. We've checked at Fulton County, and we checked in the city of Milton. And they have, I don't know how many horses that they have on that property, but certainly a lot. So I'm just trying to qualify that a little bit. They have.
Thank you.
Thank
They
you.
have. And I do want to point out that everything I've talked about supports their business. Their business is supported under these laws.
Thank you. Any questions to staff from the board? Yes, sir.
There was a PowerPoint where they showed a portion of a code that's, I believe, the Sewer Water Conservation Code. Is that something where it says no permit? Is that referencing no building permit, or is that for something else?
You were accurate to say that it doesn't eliminate a building permit requirement. Now, we don't have this variance does not ask for a variance to get them out of issuing a permit either. If that answers your question.
Second question to staff. On the actual portion of the building that was expanded, what exactly is your opinion of what portion of the building was actually expanded?
From the pictures that I've seen, mainly the Google Earth pictures, I think originally the building was two parallel rectangular structures. And so I think that back portion, that's the bottom of the U, was added. The roof over the entrance at the top was added. I think some attic space was added. And I think some work was done on the side also. So basically the two sides of the U were connected at the bottom, and the entrance at the top of the U was covered.
If a building permit, I imagine they must have gone back in and applied for a building permit, is there any penalty for them for what they've done to date? What would be the penalty if under leaving that there? And I'm just trying to understand, was there some kind of penalty for a building permit in this situation?
There is a penalty. I don't know if it's the permit fee is doubled or what. I don't know what the formula is. But there is a penalty for doing work without a building permit.
So and then they have to come in and face an ugly board like us and put them to the task of,
Well, they're here because they had, further zoning issues, but yes, they will also have a permit penalty once they get the building permit.
okay.
Angela, if we deny the application variance, the city would then request, force, whatever word you'd like to use, to take down how much of that existing structure?
I think they would have to take everything down, take the 2 additions down, take everything down, and make it 2 separate structures again.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I think I sent you pictures of where I saw the sign and where it is. Is that a proper place for that sign to have been placed? I think what you may have got sent was something a little bit, how should I say, you can make any picture look good, because I know I've seen pictures myself that look good, and they really don't do me justice. I'm really not that good. So basically, that sign was really hidden. When I got in front of that area, I mean, what is the requirement? I don't want to jump on them. Maybe I should have asked you first before I pose that question, but I really felt...
Give me 1 second, I'll find the...
Because I don't know if we should even have this hearing, if we shouldn't have it delayed another month, because the sign wasn't posted so it could be seen for 30 days in a proper location.
Is that information given to the applicants
I don't know.
also?
When did you go by one?
I went the next day after the hearing, and then I went again about 3 weeks later.
Had
And it was in the same spot?
Had they moved in?
I'll be glad to show you the picture.
Yeah, I was going
Mr. Chairman, maybe you should just close the public hearing before we discuss.
Mr. Rica, could
I
you
already did.
clarify for me when you went and if you saw a sign and where you saw the sign on the occasions that you went?
to, he has a picture here.
Because I heard discussion that a sign was put up and was subsequently moved.
Yeah. That's more or less in front of the driveway, and you can flip it. Going that direction.
They put it on their fence.
Right. And I mean, that's just different angles, in other words.
The question
So-
is it tell them where they're supposed to put it?
Yeah, do we?
Is there?
I thought it was supposed to go out in front of the property,
It is.
because you can't see that. I think we ought to defer 30.
And then there's also, that's their sign for the stable.
Go towards me.
Was there a different sign?
Yeah. Well, there's a sign for the stables, that's very visible.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I
Mr.
saw that with the...
Yeah. Looking at what we have, I don't believe there's a specific requirement as to where or how visible. I understand the practical concept that you're going to. I think at this point in time, given that a sign was up and that's what we do have, that there's no suggestion that there wasn't a sign up. If someone wanted to,
Well, should the city make?
if someone felt like they did not get notice and that they felt like the sign was in an inappropriate location, they could challenge it at that point in time.
Then I think, then I can't make
Yeah,
that case.
particularly given that there was an extreme amount of, or an interest at the last meeting, and certainly there has been, I understand, record materials put into the record after that meeting as well. Excuse me.
Okay.
That is a procedural concept that can still be raised if it's not, if someone feels like that determination is incorrect.
May I address
No,
the sign?
We've already closed the public hearing.
Sorry.
Any other questions for staff from the board? At this time, the floor is open for a motion.
for you.
Yeah, you can see the pamphlets. You can use this permit as long as you write on it for me.
As long as I do or don't write.
Right on it, yeah, whatever you do, right, if you ask, you can write on it, I don't know what you're saying. The septic tank. Oh, septic tank permit, yeah, put that in there. Then you make a motion.
Because I would make it for denial. You want me to make it?
No, don't, make it to approve it. We gotta approve this for this lady.
Huh?
We can't deny this lady, this is a horse farm, this is the city of Milton. It's already out of Fulton County, let this crap go up.
I'm of mixed opinion, that's why I hear what you're saying.
Is there, I guess I'd like, if you're contemplating what you're going to write down yourself, that's fine. If we're going to have some discussion, we either need to.
We need to announce it.
Okay, well, I'll have some discussion. I mean, one of the things I feel strongly about is water quality. If we do consider any kind of approval, I think we just got to make sure that everything that has been followed to Fulton County septic tank rules involving the bathroom, especially since we've got animals downstream that could possibly drink out of this water. I don't want to have an issue where we've got problems like this. The second issue is, again, I went out to the site, I walked around the barns, and I'm concerned that how close this barn is to the stream, that there is a chance for, again, animal waste and other things getting in the stream. I think just about every case I could recall where we allowed a structure to be close to a stream, we asked for infiltration trenches to be built around the structure to help do some things to create some better water quality for that area coming off the barn. So again, it's something that I can't remember a case, and we're talking about swimming pools, cabanas, other cases where we've asked for infiltration trenches, and I have to believe if we did approve this.
And I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with anything that you're talking about. I agree with the applicant and that we should be and need to be a supportive horse community. I think that's the foundation of a lot of the core of what we believe. But yet, we've had multiple neighbors come up, and letters have been submitted as part of the documentation that have said, these folks have violated the code and the laws that exist. And however supportive I want to be, if they had come to us in the beginning and said, hey, here's what we want to do, I think it'd be a very different story.
I agree with you.
To go out and to what seems to be regularly violate the codes as they were put into place, we're saying, oh, it's okay this time. And when's it going to stop? How many times do they have to violate it before we say enough's enough? And that's the problem I have.
Well, and the only comment that I'd like to make on that is that I have used Fulton County to permit stuff for me before.
Sure.
Back in the day, it was hard to get Fulton County to come out to sign anything or even get you started or get going. This is a horse farm. She probably has done this before. She probably did it again. But I hate to penalize her because she's doing exactly what the city of Milton would like her to do. She didn't do it right. I agree with you all.
Right.
But I think we've got to help the horse farm people as much as possible, in my opinion. And I only get one vote.
And I'm empathetic that it's a tough business. And want to be supportive of it, allow for them to train, ride, raise those horses properly. No question. But it seems to be that a lot of this activity has occurred since the city of Milton was created.
And I think a lot of other farms are doing the same thing. It's not only the one.
No, I think that's probably a valid point.
Yeah, I think somebody.
But this unfortunately is the only case that's in front of us.
Right.
Yes.
So far.
So,
Yeah,
Right.
So far.
right.
Well, I hope whatever happens out of this, that it perhaps gets very well publicized, be it double or quadruple a fee, and I'm not against quadrupling the fee,
And I'm not either.
No.
or
That's a matter of ordinance.
Council is, but.
right, but we all
That's not
want to
what we're
read
suggesting,
things right.
Counselor. We're just talking.
Are we approving these 5 things plus these?
And along those lines, our procedures would suggest that a motion be on the floor.
Right. No,
Well, we're trying to gain, how should I
why
say?
don't you make the motion as you wrote it out, and let's discuss and debate.
I'd like to make a motion, unless you want to do it.
No?
This is your first motion.
This is my first one ever.
7 years.
That's 7 years. To approve V14-002, to allow a barn to encroach in the 50-foot stream buffer, to allow a barn to encroach in the 75-foot impervious setback, to allow a barn to encroach in the rear yard, to allow an accessory structure to encroach in the side yard, and to allow a building holding animals, basically a barn, to be closer than 100 feet from the side and rear property lines, with these following conditions. The applicant should obtain the required building permits. Neither the barn nor the small stable can be enlarged from their current footprint. No further disturbance in the stream buffer. The applicant will obtain a septic tank permit, and they will install infiltration trenches at the back of the barn per the staff, the City of Milton. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. For any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If I may. And this is actually, I'd like to be a little bit, understand, make sure that as we're allowing the barn to encroach into the 50-foot stream buffer, I looked at the documentation, it's not specific as to how much we're encroaching, nor is it specific as to how much into the impervious setback.
Can we say the existing structures? Because they are existing. In other words, it can't be expanded.
Right. And I think maybe.
Okay. I will amend my motion to say the existing structures for both of those. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. It passed 3-2. Thank you and good luck. Our next case, V14-003, 1720 High Grove Club Drive. Angela, will you please present?
1720 High Grove Club Drive is a single-family home located approximately on 1.2 acres. It is part of the Wood Valley subdivision and is zoned AG1. The owner, Joseph Couch, proposes to construct a detached garage approximately 25 by 25 feet in size on his property behind and to the right of the house. Per Mr. Couch, the garage will match the materials, colors, and roof pitch of the existing house. The proposed layout has the garage encroaching into the west side setback by 10 feet. Mr. Couch states that he has explored several options for the construction of the garage and has determined that this layout would be the most logical and least obtrusive. He states that the portion of the lot directly behind the existing house is currently occupied by the septic tank and septic field. The area behind the septic field is heavily wooded and would require the removal of several large trees if located in that area. Section 64-4162I of the zoning ordinance states that accessory structures may be located in the rear or side yards, but shall not be located within a minimum yard. Since Mr. Couch's proposed garage encroaches between 8 and 10 feet into the side setback, a variance is required. On March 4th, 2014, the DRB offered the following comments. If you connect the buildings now, you have more options for finishing the living space. Garage materials shall be compatible with the existing house. If the garage doors face the street, they should be carriage style. Style and materials to be per staff approval. Add landscaping consisting of year-round vegetation to screen the garage from adjacent property. The staff held a focus meeting on March 5th, 2014, in which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, arborist, DOT stormwater all had no comments. The standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant offers the following response. I do not believe that relief, if granted, would offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance because a significant distance will remain between the proposed garage and the property line. Its proposed location is necessary due to the constraints of the site previously mentioned and is thought to be quite fitting for such a structure. The garage will enhance the appearance of the existing house and surrounding properties. Furthermore, the construction of this garage will certainly not result in any endangerment of public safety, health, or welfare. Those in the community who are aware of my plan are supportive and feel the project will benefit the neighborhood, as have other similar projects. I have submitted a letter of approval from an adjacent property owner. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Materials, roof pitch, colors, etc. so match the existing house. The final design of the garage shall be approved by city staff. Provide landscape to screen the new garage from the adjacent lot. Plant materials and types to be approved by the city arborist. That concludes the staff presentation.
At this time, are there any questions from the board to staff?
May I?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm full of questions tonight. Angela, is it common for us to request that somebody were adding a garage, that the city would have say into the design of that garage? I understand that the permitting process, I understand that aspect, but to the design of it, is that common?
I don't think it's onerous to ask that the, we have a city architect on staff now, so I don't think it's onerous to have the city architect just review the plans to make sure that the garage is matching the existing house.
That the what, I'm sorry?
That the garage would match the existing house. He would just be the one to approve it.
So it's, okay.
Angela, which subdivision is this? Do you know?
Yes.
Woodview?
Not yet. And
Wood Valley.
Wood Valley.
And my next question is there a homeowners association in there? And
I
then
believe there is.
And then my next question would be is, did they get approval from the homeowners association to do this detached garage? Because most homeowner associations don't allow that.
I believe he did, but you can confirm that with the property owner.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions to staff? Yes, sir?
Are there any letters, it's cited in this that there's some letters from adjoining owners that they agree?
There it is.
There's
on
one.
page
At the back.
8.
And is that the owner that's next door nearest this garage, or is it on the other side?
The applicant can confirm that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? At this time, we'd like to ask the applicant to please come forward and present, and if you would state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
My name is Joe Couch, resident of 1720 High Grove Club Drive, Milton, Georgia. Just to clarify on a couple of those questions, I don't believe, pretty sure there's not a legal official homeowners association for Wood Valley. We don't pay mandatory dues or anything like that. There is a group of people that send out a newsletter or something like that every once in a while, and we contribute to plant flowers at the entrance, but there's no mandatory fee or legal organization as I know it. The adjacent, or the letter from the adjacent property owner is the property owner of the directly adjacent property. In other words, the most near to the garage. So 17, it's currently a vacant lot. The owner of that property owns the 3 lots next to my house, 1730, 40 and 50, and his house is on 1740. And the 2 lots on either side of his house are vacant.
Any questions to the applicant from the board? Yes, sir.
How close are you proposing to build this garage to your side property line?
So it would be roughly 15 feet from the outer limits of the garage to the property line.
And that's the closest point nearest the front of the garage. As you go
Right.
back, it looks like it's sloping a little bit further away as you get
Right.
towards the back.
I think, I don't know if I put a dimension on that or not, but I think it slopes back to, 6 or 7 feet. So it would just be a corner of the garage at the most extreme portion, or extreme, encroachment into the setback would be 10 feet, and would lessen as you went down the length of the garage.
Are there other homes in this subdivision that have a garage similar to this?
There are two that I know of that are detached garages. And of course, there's several, on the way into the neighborhood down Dinsmore Road that have detached garages, but within the neighborhood itself, there are 2.
And is this single story or double, is this going to be a 2-story garage?
It would be
the plan I got shows, it looks like it may have like either an office or something on top.
Kind of a 1.5. Well, there will be 2 stories. I don't know if this made it into your package or not.
Yeah.
It
did. Yes, sir.
That's kind of what
That's why I
I'm
was just trying to
envisioning.
figure out.
May I? Are you done?
Yes, sir.
Only question halfway, sir. The vacant lots that you speak of that abut, that sounds like that portion of the property. You say that one of your neighbors owns those currently. Are those, to the best of your knowledge, are they under contract to be sold to anybody?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And I believe one of the pictures that you have in your package shows that vacant lot looking kind of up at the slope
Right.
and into the forest, which is the vacant lot there.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
This time, we'd like to open the floor for public comment, if there is any. Sir, as there is none, you do have the opportunity to make a closing statement if you would like.
I'll never turn down an opportunity. I leave any money on the table. But, this is just something I need to do to keep things organized at my house. We've got 4 little boys, and they're growing up. And right now we have too many bikes and little crap that, gets in the yard. And we just we would rather keep it all contained and into one spot. And I think the neighbors would appreciate it not being in the yard, but into a garage. And so that's kind of the primary focus right now. So that's my closing argument.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions to staff from the board? At this time, I'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of V14-003. This is to allow an accessory structure garage to encroach into the side yard setback at a maximum amount of 15, has to be 15 feet from the property line. And this is with conditions that the material, roof pitch, color, etc. shall match the existing house. The final design of the garage shall be approved by city staff. The provided landscaping to screen the new garage from adjacent lots. Plant material and type to be approved by the city arborist.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Just one point of clarification, sir. Mr. Rico, you said by the city arborist. And
That's what the staff said when she made her presentation.
Okay,
The landscaping? Yes.
Yeah.
okay. I'm just
So
making sure we're all on the
I heard
same.
it, caught it, and corrected it.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion to approve V14-003 to allow an accessory structure garage to encroach into the side setback with a maximum of 15 feet from the property line with the following conditions. Materials, roof pitch, colors, etc. shall match existing house. Final design of garage shall be approved by city staff and provide landscape to screen new garage from adjacent lots. Plant material and type to be approved by the city arborist. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same size. Thank you and good luck.
Appreciate you following the rules.
Yes, we do.
Our next variance, V14-004, 16045 Laconia Lane. Angela, will you please present?
The site, 16405 Laconia Lane, is a 1.81 acre undeveloped lot in the Hampshire subdivision. The property is owned AG1. The lot is considered a flag lot, and the front setback is measured from the end of, we call the stem. A creek diagonally traverses the middle of the lot. The lot also has several areas of steep topography, which the applicant states limits the location of the septic field. The applicant, Alec Rickenbacker, proposes a single-family home on the property. He would like to place the house approximately 33 feet from the front property line, or where the stem ends. This will place the house approximately 60 feet from the house on the adjacent lot. Section 64416B of the zoning ordinance states that the front yard for parcel zoned AG1 is 60 feet. Since Mr. Rickenbacker proposes to reduce the front yard setback from 60 feet to 30 feet, a variance is required. On March 4th, 2014, the DRB offered the following comments. Add plantings in between the two driveways in the horseshoe area to provide screening between the garage doors. The arborist shall review the existing landscape and screening. The staff held a focus meeting on March 5th, 2014, in which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review. The arborist, DOT stormwater, had no comments. Standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows. The lot is over 1.8 acres and is located at the end of a private driveway in the Hampshire subdivision. Due to the very steep topography, a creek which traverses the lot, and limited soil suitable for the septic drain field, the buildable area for the lot is severely limited. Without this variance, extensive subwalls and drainage issues would result in a very unfavorable house siting. Lot 38, immediately adjacent to this lot, is unbuilt on at this time and owned by the applicant. The proposed configuration, taking into account the front yard setback variance, will result in the best siting for the house while preserving the majority of the vegetation and the slope of the lot. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Add plantings in between the two driveways in the horseshoe area to provide screening between the garage doors. The arborist shall approve the landscape plan, and the final design of the house to be approved by the city architect. This concludes the staff presentation, and I have a few larger site plans I can give you to look at.
Thank you. Any questions to staff regarding this application? At this time, we'd like to ask the applicant to please come forward and present. If you state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
No, I don't. I'll throw one out later. Good evening. My name is Alec Rickenbaker. My company is Peachtree Residential Properties. We've come before you to request this front yard variance for Lot 39 in the Hampshire subdivision. What I'd like to do is point out the context of this variance so that you can get a feel for where it is we're requesting. This shows the subdivision layout for the Hampshires. Freemanville Road is right down here at the very bottom of the page. This particular lot is on the very rear of the subdivision, the very last end of the private drive that extends from this cul-de-sac to here. There is a large creek that runs from northeast to southwest in this direction, which is really the primary geographical feature that affects this variance. This is the end of the private drive that comes across here. This is a turnaround to be built. There is no home built on this lot 38 adjacent to us currently. This is our requested location for the new home. The existing 60-foot building setback line is required from the end of the public street on the front yard setback. Because of that requirement, that setback line runs right through here. The creek runs right across here, and the stream buffer is highlighted there to show you how close it is. If we were to move this house back 30 feet, the front of the house would be along here, which would push it well into the creek. So our request, and also we have some steep topography coming down the hill and some fairly unfavorable soils on the lot. It's a septic lot. The only place the drain field works is right here. When we met with the design review board, they suggested some planting in this area that will help buffer this garage to that garage. I might point out that this truly is a side yard setback physically as it relates to what we're building here. And the side yard requirement for AG1 is a 25-foot side yard setback, so we're already exceeding that with this request, although it's a request to vary the front yard setback. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Rickenbacker, the house that's adjoining this one, is that home already sold and occupied?
No, it's a vacant lot.
So would you also be the owner of that lot?
We have a contract for that lot to purchase.
So whatever you build here, you may wind up having to build a house next door, in which case you need to make it look good enough so it could sell.
Absolutely. We will be building that lot also.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
At this time, we'd like to open the floor for any public comment, if there is any. Do you have any additional comments you'd like to make since there's? I'm good. Okay.
You don't want to talk about 4 kids?
You're
or
going to leave
anything?
money on the table? Any questions to staff from the board? This time, I'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of V14-004. This is to reduce the front yard setback from 60 feet to 30 feet with the recommended conditions of adding planting in between the 2 driveways in the horseshoe area to provide screening between the garage doors. The city arborist shall approve the landscape plan. Final design of the house to be approved by the city architect. These are the conditions I think will keep it in conformity with the neighborhood.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second.
Can I ask you a point of clarification, Mr. Recook? Did you described a horseshoe in between the driveways? Was there a reference to a particular drawing?
There was not, but I could make a reference to it if everybody would like me to amend my motion.
They have a drawing up there.
Yeah, I can amend it and do this, but I've got to get approval to, or I don't know how I withdraw you need to withdraw yours, and I need to,
If you would like to
Restate.
amend your motion and have the second.
and I would like to
agree the
amend my motion to reference a plan called the Hampshire's Phase 2 Variance Exhibit for Lot 37, prepared by Travis Pruitt and Associate, dated January 17th, 2014, prepared for
Don't go into all that, that's enough.
Peachtree Residential.
Travis Pruitt.
Ms. Plesnarski, can you confirm that your second still stands?
Just say
Yes.
I
Yes.
approve the amended.
Reference to the site.
References.
Any discussion? We have a motion to approve V14-004 to reduce the front yard setback from 60 feet to 30 feet with the following conditions. Add plantings in between the two driveways in the horseshoe area. Provide screening between the garage doors. The city arborist shall approve the landscape plan, and final design of house be approved by the city arborist. Per plan Phase 2, Lot 37 by Travis Pruitt and Associates, dated 1/17/2014. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. It passed unanimously.
Good luck, sir.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for building in Milton.
Thanks for the good visuals. Makes our job easier.
Can I request, if you've spoken already and haven't given me your yellow card yet, could you go ahead and bring that up, please, so I can keep track of them?
That brings us to V14005, 16397 Wax Myrtle Road, Blue Valley. Angela, will you please present?
Yes, sir.
What are you doing? I can have that.
Oh, that's yours.
The site, 16397 Wax Myrtle Road, is the proposed location of the recreation area for the Blue Valley subdivision. The 2.98 acre property is zoned AG1. The proposed rec area will include a pool and clubhouse, 2 tennis courts, playground, and community mailbox. Bordering Birmingham Highway and Interior Street, Wax Myrtle Road, the rec area is adjacent to one currently undeveloped residential lot. Originally, the amenity area was located in the rear of the subdivision. This area proved to be unsuitable for this use based on wetlands and soil conditions. Due to the size of the area available, the tennis courts need to be placed within 50 feet of the adjoining lot, which is lot 64. The soil conditions on this lot are such that the home must be situated to the far left in order to accommodate the septic field. By default, the house on lot 64 and the edge of the tennis courts will be at least 100 feet apart. Section 64-1609 2B of the zoning ordinance states that neighborhood pools, pool equipment, and decks must be 100 feet from the property line of a residential lot. Since the applicant proposes to locate the tennis courts approximately 50 feet from lot 64, a variance is required. The Blue Valley subdivision consists of approximately 90 lots. Based on this number of lots, the ordinance requires 14 parking spaces. The applicant proposes 13 spaces in order to keep paved surfaces to a minimum. Section 64-1410 requires 1 per 15 dwelling units, requires 1 parking space per 15 dwelling units beyond 60 served. Because 14 parking spaces are required and 13 are proposed, a variance is required. On March 4th, 2014, the DRB offered the following comments. Maintain the 60-foot rural view shed along Birmingham Highway. Push the adjacent house over as far as possible. Provide screening between the rec area and the residential lot. And move the playground if possible to minimize distraction on the tennis courts. If the staff held a focus meeting on March 5th, 2014, at which time the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, the arborist, DOT, stormwater, all had no comments. The standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant offers the following response. The reduction of the parking by one space and the placement of the adjacent house at least 100 feet from the edge of the tennis courts, we believe that relief based on the requested adjustments to the ordinance, if granted, will not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, nor would it cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. Finally, public safety, health, and welfare will still be secured. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Maintain the 60-foot rural view shed along the Birmingham Highway frontage. Planting should be approved by the city arborist. The 50 feet between the edge of the tennis court and lot 64 should be heavily vegetated to provide screening. Plant types and location to be approved by the city arborist. The final design of the house on lot 64 to be approved by the city arborist. This concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions to the staff from the board members? At this time, we'd like to ask the applicant to please come forward and present. And if you'd state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Ron Pfeiffer. My address is 5006 Kingsley Manor Court, Marietta, Georgia, 30066. I represent Blue Valley Investments 1 and Sharp Residential. We are the owners and the builders of Blue Valley subdivision. When we originally purchased this land about a year ago, it was realized very quickly that the location that the original developer had picked for the amenity center would not work. It has 3 areas in it. There is a stream buffer in it that's 50-foot wide that kind of meanders through this area. There's a 100-foot floodplain that takes up most of the area, and there's a dam breach zone that also occupies that area. So where he had originally put the amenity center just wouldn't fit. We looked at this other area, which was also a common area, and as Angela said, it's 2.98 acres. We felt that in 2.98 acres, we should easily be able to get a tennis court, 2 tennis courts, and a pool in. When we started looking at all of the setbacks required for this, it became a very tight situation. We met repeatedly with the staff to come up with this plan and fill this area, but what happens is the tennis courts have to be closer than the 100-foot recommended. Because of the way Lot 64 is, which is not a house yet, it is a vacant lot. We will be building that vacant lot. We will end up with well more than 100 feet between the house and the tennis courts.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
2 questions for you. Number one, one of the recommended conditions is for the staff to have landscaping between the tennis court and the house.
Right.
If you were going to put planting there, what type of planting would you be recommending?
We
actually
spoke to Mark Law, and what he's recommended, and if you look at this, which is in your packet, what he's recommended is trees, various trees, both overstory and understory trees. And what he has recommended is located in here: redbuds, dogwoods, pines, oaks. What he did not want us to do, which we had originally done, was a very formal planting. He did not want a formal planting. He wanted groups of trees that would shield this house next door and also shield the amenity center from Birmingham Highway. So that's what you're seeing today.
So you would have an objection to putting a berm there and perhaps even going purely with evergreens?
Actually, we've been asked not to do that by
Well, I understand that, but what I'm asking you is you wouldn't have a problem doing that.
I would not have a problem doing that. We had talked about that. He said he would prefer not.
And as far as the plans go, I know having built a number of tennis courts and being near homes,
Right.
it was very important for me to block and screen that house from the tennis courts, in particular for the lights, because they do go on at night.
Right.
And then secondly, the leaves, the amount of leaves that come off trees is a hindrance to many tennis players because of A, the staining, and number 2, the slipperiness when they do play.
Right.
So that we always try to avoid having any type of trees around any of the tennis courts that will contribute to that. So you don't have a problem going with a berm or evergreens or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions to the applicant?
Just one, if I may, sir.
Go ahead.
It's assumed in here, but lot 64, you own that lot?
Yes, we own that lot.
Okay, that lot is not under contract by anybody?
It's not under contract. It's not even for sale.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. This time, we'd like to open the floor for public comment. Yes, sir. If you would please come forward and state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
my,
sir.
my name is Curtis Mills, and excuse me, I live at 16355 Birmingham Highway and own an adjoining house at 16345 Birmingham Highway. If you all have a picture of the plan in front of you, you'll see across the street two drawn-in driveways directly across from the entrance and the amenities. Those are my driveways. So I am literally, when I come down my driveway, I'm looking at what's going to be here. Forgive the superlative, but I'm going to see that more than anyone else on the planet till they carry me out in a box. So I have an interest. A little bit of background for level setting. In January of 2008, I was here in front of you all, Mr. Recook and Mr. Chernick. I think we're the maybe only current members, Todd's. Anyway, a couple of you all were here, and Mr. Chatham, through David Carragher, requested a variance on all 90-some-odd acres for various reasons. That was Justice Martin's Angus farm, and you could just about shoot a marble across it. The variance was questionable, but a blanket variance was granted on all 90-some-odd lots, largely on the basis that David Chatham wouldn't do anything that wasn't tasteful, and everyone knew that. Well, fast forward, David Chatham's out of the picture, variances stand, setback variances, and I'm stuck with whatever happens. I'm pretty sensitive about that. As you all may know, they tore down the $1.5 million barn that was built before Chatham bought it and planned to maximize houses. Not criticizing someone trying to make a living, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but again, I'm pretty sensitive about that. The original plan called for all pasture in the front with that barn remaining and the amenities being further back. And I don't know what the soils work said, but I do know that that farm is 300 acres of land. We're only talking about the half that's in Fulton, and there was some sort of a sequitur implication that since it couldn't be where it was planned, that the only other place that it could be was on this 3 acres of common land. Well, there's tons of other space in there. My contention would be that ought to be green, and instead of so densely developing this 300 acres of land that they got to pack that amenity right on the road, maybe it ought to be 3 acres of green space and find another it's 1% of the total, find another piece of land to put it in. That said, I'd rather be looking at that with some good landscape buffer than 2 more houses if they're going to cram them in there. But I don't know if it's common land. Maybe they couldn't build there. So I would ask that question. And also, I don't know the answer to this, but you all probably do. If the 14 or 15 spaces were based on 90 homes, is there going to be an equivalent amenity on the Cherokee side? Because there's as much land on that side. I don't know how many houses are planned, but that would suggest that either they only have half the spaces they need, or there needs to be a redundant amenity on the other side, and I don't know Cherokee's zoning. So I would ask that if you do approve this, I would ask that you not approve it if they couldn't put houses there. But, you know, I got a mushy request. If they're going to put houses there, I'd rather be looking at the landscaping than a couple of houses. And I also would add, some of you all know this, but these houses are half the value of what they were going to be. So this whole deal is not an upgrade for me and the surrounding land. So if it is approved that the barrier be tastefully, I don't want a wall of green, I'm not suggesting that, but that at least it be opaque enough that I'm not looking at that infrastructure. My neighbor, Amar Verma, had a death in the family yesterday. He was going to speak tonight, and he asked me to informally, I know he doesn't have a yellow card, et cetera, but he has the 10 acres to the north of me. I'm on 25 acres. He has the 10 north of me, and the land to the south of me is for sale. It's a 66-acre parcel. They couldn't care less what's done. The land to the south of this is, as you all may know, largely being sold for development. They're not as interested as we are, and my neighbor Ammer is going to build a house that's going to be looking directly at this just north. So I hope I haven't rambled too much and that was sensible, but I appreciate your consideration because this is radically changing our little area, and we'd like to keep it as tasteful and rural as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Oh. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. My name is Julie Zonner Bailey, and I live at 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia. I would like to ask that this variance be denied. I support the comments that were just made by the prior neighbor that lives directly across the street, Mr. Mills. He made some extremely eloquent points, and I think it's important that those do be considered. I'd like to add to those points specifically by just going back to the 4 tenants that you spoke of when you first opened this evening's meeting, and those being the tenants under which the Board of Zoning Appeals should be looking at particular variances. The first that was mentioned was whether or not a variance is in the spirit of this particular area. Obviously, this is the Birmingham character area, specifically AG1 rural area of Milton. Those of us that live in this area would say that putting an amenity right on the road that instead should be a rural viewshed is in fact not in the spirit of this particular character area. So I would suggest that this particular variance does not meet that standard. Secondly, there is commentary about is there a hardship. It was just noted by Mr. Mills that this particular development is on roughly 300 acres. To assume that this amount of dense amenity and parking has to be put directly on the road, directly across from people who fully intend to live here for the long haul. He mentioned that he would be buried on the land, and I think he fully intends to live here with his children for a very long time. I think that we need to consider the fact that this is not a hardship. It does not meet the letter of the law for hardship. This particular 2.9 acres could be anywhere in that 300, and it could be appropriately buffered from other homes as well as from the roadway. Additionally, there was mention in the opening statements about whether or not there is any detriment or negative impact on the neighbors. You just heard from the folks that would look at this, and there is a detriment to their property values as well as to their viewshed, as well as to those that live in the surrounding area. You know, as we do all, that the staff is working on creating a rural viewshed. We applaud that effort. We applaud that 60-foot viewshed. This negates that, and so if this particular amenity package is placed on this particular 2.98 acres, you can't meet that 60-foot rule viewshed. And I think we all would agree that that's really critical, not just to this Birmingham character area, but to the whole of the area that represents our AG1 land. I also would ask, as did Mr. Mills, is that should there not be a denial, obviously you need to take into consideration all those things that he asked. But I think for all the reasons stated, both by Mr. Mills, myself, and also the neighbor that could not be here this evening due to a death, is that there are ample locations on this property for the amenities to be appropriately placed, to be appropriately buffered, and to still have amenities, but also to meet the spirit and the intent of the Birmingham character area within the current overlays and within the current laws. So with that, I ask that you would deny this and encourage this developer to appropriately place the amenities in a more appropriate location. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? At this point, the applicant has the opportunity to make a rebuttal statement if you would like.
Good evening. I'm Farrell Middleton. I work with Sharp Residential as well. I know Mr. Pfeiffer gave the initial thought on that. He's our project manager. I'm the Vice President of Construction. Is it appropriate for me to respond on behalf of our case? While I certainly understand the thoughts of the neighbors, with regard to this piece of property, it was a relatively complicated piece that Mr. Chatham developed years ago. The 300 acres they're referring to, we sold off that portion that was in Cherokee County. Liberty Grove Road is the county line between Cherokee and Fulton, and we have sold the greater portion of that property, I believe, that they're referring to. So there's not ample land in order to do this. Inside the confines of the Blue Valley neighborhood where we're going to build the approximately 90 houses, we do not have another area. There are wetlands, there are a couple of streams going through there, a couple of detention ponds, lakes, that kind of deal. So we are... it is a septic neighborhood. The lots are 1 acre plus, as is required. And with regard to the proximity of our proposed area for the amenity area, if you look at your plans, the initial one designed by Mr. Chatham years ago fronts Birmingham Road as well. It's just several hundred feet further down the road. So it was going to be adjacent to the road anyway. With regard to the comments regarding the barn, we decided we did not want to be in the business of managing a stable and horses and things of that nature. So we made a decision accordingly. And yes, we are putting in houses, but that was the initial intent of the entire development. It is a housing development that was developed years and years ago. We ended up purchasing it. And again, the original amenity area, it was from inside the neighborhood standpoint, it was a very good area for it. However, it still fronted Birmingham Road, so the issue would still be the same regarding this location in relation to these properties across Birmingham Highway. Again, this particular area that we've got, we feel that it is suited for the particular amenity area. And again, the single variance that we've got mainly is with regard to the tennis courts being 50 feet from a side property line rather than 100 feet. All of the other structures, the swimming pool, the pool house, the parking, the parking area, it's a little bit of a gray area, the number of parking spaces needed. It is ample for the amenity site and the number of homes in the neighborhood. So we do request, of course, that the variance be granted. Again, all we've done is move the amenity area several hundred feet from where it was going to be to a site that is more suitable, that can support the amenity area.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Sure. Go right ahead. Stay right there a second. A board member has a question for you.
Do you have any letters from any of the other adjoining property owners across the street for being in agreement with this?
No, sir, we do not. Not realizing that properties across the street would be technically adjoining property owners. I've never done that for a variance request before.
But you're willing to talk with Mr. Mills, aren't you?
Oh, of course. I've never met Mr. Mills, nor Ms. Bailey.
On the parking spaces that you've got, you're showing a lack of one space. Just to make sure I understand it, this recreation area is only for these 90 homes. No one else is able to join this recreation area. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's nobody outside the neighborhood that's going to have access to this.
And as far as your long-term, are you allowing people from outside the community to join the recreation area where we're going to have problems with parking?
No, sir. That is not on the agenda at all.
And just looking at the plan, it looks like there's a center island that you have parking that you kind of go around. Is there no way to fit one or two spots in that center island to allow for parking?
With regard to the parking, actually, yes.
I can answer that.
Okay, sure.
What you see as a center island
Yes, sir.
is actually a drainage area, a swale area, so that we can filter the water that comes off the parking before it goes into the lake. Because there's a lake across the street from this, and what they requested was this is a bio location, so that is drainage Everything will go into there. It will then go into a filter and across the street. That's why the island was there.
So you're doing this to basically improve
Clean the water
quality?
Yeah, clean the water before it goes into the lake. And this was a recommendation by staff.
And as far as the streets themselves, are these 24-foot wide streets from back curb to back of curb? Or are they 27?
If I remember correctly, they're 26-foot back to back, and these are all private streets. This is a gated community, so they're all private streets.
Okay.
It's got a 50-foot right-of-way, but it's 26 back to back.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions to staff from the board? This time, we'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of V14-005. This is to allow a neighborhood tennis court to be located less than 100 feet from a residential property line, and to allow a reduction in the parking spaces by one space, with the recommended conditions of maintaining a 60-foot rural view shed along Birmingham Highway's frontage. Planting shall be approved by the city arborist. Number 2, that the 50-foot between the edge of the tennis court and lot 64 shall be heavily vegetated to provide screening. Plant types and location be approved by the city arborist. And number 3, that a 6-foot berm be built along the side lot line of lot 64 with evergreen trees to shield the tennis court from lot 64.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second. Discussion?
Please.
Yes.
I'm empathetic to the gentleman who spoke earlier and his concerns about seeing that, I mean, all the time. I mean, in your motion, Walt, you didn't suggest any type of screening against the street.
I really did. If you read the first condition says maintain a 60-foot rural view shed along Birmingham Highway frontage. That in particular is making reference to creating the screen. Now, what I've been told by the city is they don't typically like berms along the frontage of a road, so that's why I avoided it. But in the case of a tennis court, I am concerned about the lights and shielding. And whenever I've built them, and they've been very successful with building them, if I build up a berm and I put evergreen trees, I have less problems with adjoining property owners. Now, whether we need to incorporate a berm around the back of it, the problem that I see also is you've got some issues with septic fields on this property. They do have a lot of impervious surface on this property, so finding an area for a field line will also be a little bit difficult. So I did want to incorporate additional berms.
But seeing those from the street, and particularly for the neighbors that are there looking at those, I get that.
Well, the city just worked with me on a project on Freemanville Road where they asked me to do basically a rural view shed, which was composed of 4-inch trees, a mixture of trees, understory and overstory. And I imagine that's the same thing they would request at this location. And that's why I didn't comment any further about requesting it. And I have no idea how many plants they've got to plant, but I mean, I think that's where I'll leave it up to the staff to create that vision. And I think that's where we need to leave the staff a little flexibility for that in that location.
And my only concern is when you put in a berm with evergreen trees, you're taking all the power out of the city arborist's hands by forcing them to do this. And I kind of wish we'd leave it up to the city arborist and let him make the decisions.
Well, one of the problems I've got is sometimes there's a utility to a greenhouse, there's a utility to a tennis court. We've got to be conscious of what we have there. And I think when you're trying to create a screen between a home, evergreens really work the most efficiently. I think most homeowners, when they have a screening situation with driveways, they go in with evergreens, pure evergreens to create a screen. And be it magnolias or be it whatever, it's something where they create a very heavy screen. The only problem is I've had the discussion with city arborists, and I had my hands tied in some cases. I just want to be a little bit more specific because I think that screening is important. And again, these people are going to develop the house right next door, so they're going to have to figure out how to sell it, whether the berm is on the lot's property or, for that matter, the evergreens are on that lot's property. It's up to them.
And my concern wasn't necessarily the lot, because I think it's unbuilt and not there right now. So whoever ultimately buys it, they're going to see what's there, be aware of it. It was more for the existing neighbors that what are they going to look at every single day?
That's right.
And trying to make it as it's going to be built. So how can we
shield it?
How can we shield it appropriately?
And again, I'd love to use a berm, but the city's against it, and I feel there's appropriate uses of berms, but they don't like it as much. So that's why I didn't give that opportunity. So.
May
Would
I?
you like me to comment?
I would.
Sure. Okay.
How did you guess?
We are in the midst of amending the Northwest Overlay Zone, which has development requirements in it. And that is in the process and will be coming to the Planning Commission shortly and then on to City Council. And in that Northwest Overlay, which we're actually changing the name of it as well, we are going to require that all lots that front along main roads, not subdivision streets, but the main roads, have this so-called rural view shed, which will entail 40 feet of buffer and then another 20 feet of setback, totaling 60 feet. In the interim, until that is put in place, any rezonings that come through, any use permits, anything that comes through that we can leverage, we are putting that requirement into the conditions.
Right.
And that's why you're seeing it tonight.
Okay. Can you help me better understand, because I want to make sure I don't make an assumption on what a rural, I was being kicked, I wasn't sure I was being told to do something.
Well, yes, and that's it. And let me just elaborate more. It does not include a berm.
Okay.
A berm to us is a very suburban type of development creation. And again, the operative word here is rural viewshed. And so to us, a rural viewshed is essentially an undisturbed viewshed to the extent. Obviously, there are some fields as one drives along, but to the extent that we can maintain those trees as you drive along, that's what we're trying to do. And if we have to recreate them or whatnot, we will do that as part of this requirement. But to put a berm in, if you can think of a lot of suburban communities that you drive, there's nothing wrong with berms, but it's a suburban type of development amenity. And we think of ourselves as being more rural, and we're trying to protect that rural look, that bucolic look. And so we think the better way to do it is through a 40-foot buffer with the additional 20-foot setback.
Versus that. So the comments that Mr. Mills had made earlier, do you think that by those setbacks that that would impair the visual nature of him coming down his driveway from his front house sufficiently?
Well, again, it's a matter of the developer working with the arborist and to make sure that rural viewshed is landscaped sufficiently to provide that visual buffer.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Since they don't want a berm.
That's along the road. I'm putting a berm along the side property line.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? We have a motion and a second to approve V14-005 to allow neighborhood tennis courts to be located less than 100 feet from a residential property line, to allow reduction in parking spaces by one space with the following conditions. 1, maintain the 60-foot rural view shed along the Birmingham Highway frontage. Planning shall be approved by the city arborist. 2, the 50 feet between the edge of the tennis courts on lot 64 should be heavily vegetated, provide screening. Plant types and location be approved by the city arborist. And a berm along the side of the line with evergreen trees to shield the tennis courts from lot 64. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. It passed unanimously.
Comes a tough one.
Yeah.
Angela, the board would like a 5-minute break. Do we need to do anything before? Can we just announce that, or?
Just take a motion to
Take recess for 5 minutes.
recess. Yeah.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor of 5-minute recess, opposed, same sign.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah,
Good
I need
catch.
some more water.
You ready? Angel, would you
I have
like
to go into the restroom. Thank you. Be right
No.
back. Yeah, I
No, need something else.
That was great.
Are these still on?
Yes. It was very nice. Well, you know, wait, whatever breaks he wants. Yeah. Okay, yeah, take a break. Oh, I can see yours. Great.
Trying to get away with it.
So you already knew. Who was
Some derogatory picture of the neighbor's property. Well, that's the same person who trained her daughter how to ride a horse. And anyway, there's a real hostility of Wood Road against her and what she did. So that's why I kind of, I don't know. The mayor may not be hearing if we go through the bill, really.
They may be. You know, but again, you know what? she built all those barns in Fulton County, nobody gave her money. And then when you do it 5 or 6 times, then you think you don't have to ask.
But everybody else,
No, they haven't all. I know people on West Brookwood that redid their whole entire kitchen, went out 25 feet and never got a permit. Because no, their neighbors in the front yard, it was a bill.
that's why I hope it gets publicized.
Well, I do too. I mean, it needs
They
to
got
get
close to
Yeah.
getting 20.
Yeah, it needs to get out. I agree.
That's
Yeah,
weird.
it's because things get tougher.
But
You're right.
there's a lot of stuff.
You guys ready? You go pee?
I'm here for another 2 hours.
Let's start this. How do we do it?
Wait, we got one more person.
Well, he's right there. He's just out there talking.
Okay.
He'll come back. Do you want to announce a poll? You want me to?
If you need to talk about the procedure,
Well, I mean, how are you going to get these people back?
Angela, I don't know if we have enough yellow cards for all these people to talk.
And do you have to have a time limit? Good.
We think the attorney's going to do it for both sides.
Very well.
I'd like to call the March 18, 2014 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting back to order. And that brings us to V13-011, Owens Lake Road, 6 Hills, Phase 4, 6 Maples. Staff, will you please present?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to present this case originally as it is a different procedural vehicle and a different animal than that which you have heard tonight, and I believe it may be the first one this board has heard, certainly in several years. This is, as opposed to what is termed a primary variance in the zoning ordinance, this is considered a secondary variance. It is, in effect, it is an appeal of a decision made by the city's community development director. In this particular case, the community development director issued a decision on October 4th, 2013, denying a concept plan, and the applicant has appealed that decision as to whether or not the community development director, the basis for her denial was an appropriate interpretation of the city's zoning ordinance. This board's bylaws have established a kind of a base procedure for that type of hearing. It did not provide for public comments, and also the ordinance did not make reference to this board's standard of review. To that end, I have had various discussions with the applicant in order to make sure that we came up with a procedure that would hopefully, and in so doing, would be an agreed upon procedure which would not be subject to challenge on a procedural issue for this particular hearing, provide as much input as is reasonable to accommodate and allow for a decision by this board. To that end, we had reached an agreement which would allow the city would present the case, present the decision that was made and the rationale for that decision, and then allow the petitioner, under the proposal, 15 minutes, which might be reserved for rebuttal, to present their argument. They could submit documents, and I understand that a number of documents have been submitted both for and against the proposal. Those could also be considered. At the conclusion of the petitioner's time, whether by 15 minutes or at the time reserving any remaining time, the public would then be invited to speak. Again, we propose that would be for 15 minutes as well. Total amount of time, not each individual member, but total amount of 15 minutes. And they would also be entitled to rely on submitted documents or submit additional documents and testimony. And finally, if the petitioner had reserved any time rebuttal, that amount of time would be allowed to be used in rebuttal. At that point in time, the BZA would close the public hearing. BZA would deliberate on the merits of the petition, with the petitioner bearing the burden of proof to show the director's interpretation of the zoning ordinance as reflected in the decision being appealed was clearly erroneous. because that is an amendment to the bylaws, I would appreciate if the board was so inclined to make a motion to adopt those procedures for this one agenda item only. It would not apply to any future agenda items or meetings. Yes, sir.
Council, do we need to ask the opposing side if they have any problems with our procedures or any comments about what they would
did
have?
sign it.
They did sign it, so they're in agreement with it as well?
Are you speaking with respect to 6 Maples?
Yes.
Yes.
So they are in agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we accept the amendment to the bylaws for case number V13-011 Owens Lake Road for this consideration of appeals only, as stated by Counselor and as submitted to us.
For a second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor of the adoption, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. At this time, will the city please present?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Paul Fricke with Gerard and Davis. We're city attorneys. We'll be making this presentation. However, we do have the Community Development Director, Ms. Kathleen Fields, to field questions if necessary. This is, I'm going to make this fairly simple. A concept plan was submitted for the development of what was termed the Six Hills subdivision Phase 4. The concept plan was submitted to the Community Development Director pursuant to her authority to approve such a concept plan, to review and approve. Upon review of the concept plan, the Community Development Director considered various items and issues. One of those was the location of the road that accessed the subdivision through the previously existing, or the currently and previously existing Six Hills subdivision. In that particular phase would have been Phase 2. This is not a new project. The existing subdivision and the proposed subdivision have been concepts that have been out there for some period of time. In fact, I believe predating this particular Community Development Director and even predating the city itself. To that end, this issue has percolated throughout the city, and Ms. Field was aware of this particular project before the submission. In reviewing that, she was able to review the final plat that was recorded for Six Hills Unit 2, which provided what was called an access way shown on that particular plat. I believe it is in your materials in numerous locations. I know specifically it's attached as Exhibit 7 of the application. I believe there's also a package submitted by the Wonderleys that probably has it. I don't know the exact tab at this point in time. But in knowing that that was the location of the proposed access, Ms. Field reviewed that document in conjunction with her review of the proposed concept plan for what was called Phase 4 in order to determine whether there was compliance with Section 64-2397 of the City of Milton Code. That particular provision reads, "New public and private streets must be located a minimum of 50 feet from any peripheral property line adjoining AG1 and residentially zoned property unless interparcel access is required." In this case, the concern that Ms. Field identified was the road that was shown in the concept plan traveled not only up to the within 50 feet, but up to and through what would be considered the peripheral property, which adjoins the AG property that is the Unit 2 property. There was not at the time and is not currently a road that has been accepted and dedicated to the city. The access way does not indicate that it is a road. While there has been discussion of intentions to put a road at that location, the community development director did not find that there was an existing road. Therefore, the proposed road would be a new road under Section 64-2397. To the extent there's any question as to whether interparcel access is required, Section 64-2392 addresses when the city might require interparcel access. That section reads, interparcel access shall be provided to adjacent properties upon determination by the Director of Community Development Department that such access is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. Community Development Director determined that was, or has not made such a determination. Therefore, the interparcel access has not been required by the city, and Section 64-2397 remains to be complied with. As a result, the Community Development Director did issue her determination on October 4th, 2013. I believe it's Exhibit 2 to the applicant's package. And that is the issue that is before this board on the appeal, whether or not the Community Development Director appropriately and properly interpreted the Section 64-2397, the language. I will remind the board this is not a question of whether or not a variance would be appropriate. That would be a separate process which can be pursued separate and apart from this in the future if the applicant is dissatisfied or if the appeal is not successful. That being said, the city believes that it's a fairly clear statement that there is no existing road. Therefore, the proposed road is a new road, and Section 64-2397 applies and would prohibit approval of the proposed concept plan. And her decision to deny approval of the concept plan was appropriate and should be affirmed by this board. Thank you.
Any questions from the board to any of the staff members? Yes, sir.
On the final plat, I think it makes reference to, it says access way. Yeah. And I'm just trying to understand, that is the issue, is it not the terminology access way or access? And then secondly, was that a condition of the zoning that this property be granted an access point to allow the property to get zoned? I only have one little sheet of the final plat. I would really prefer if I've gotten all the sheets of the final plat. And then the third question is, under the calculations for public street and public drainage and public easements and public park and open space, has anyone done the calculations to see if this access way is actually considered part of the public street calculations?
I believe that the opposition may have calculated that in their submissions. If not, I believe that may be addressed this evening.
Okay.
And I believe the public may have insight into that.
So
I don't have that information at my fingertips.
Okay.
But just to make sure that I understand the point that you made, sir, you had said there was discussion of intentions of a street. It's the city's...
And I'm sorry, discussion of what?
Intentions.
Okay, thank you.
Of a street. It's your point, the directors, that there was no fact to that point, that there was no documentation to indicate that this was ever planned for or developed as a street.
Well, I believe, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, her position on that was an intention does not a road make.
Sure.
And that at this point in time, we're not aware of any actual street being in existence. Therefore, it would be a new street under her interpretation of this ordinance section.
Okay. Is that accurate, ma'am?
Yes. Counsel, let me ask one question. At one point, there was access to this property off of Birmingham Highway. Is that access still there, or has that been sold to someone else?
That's something you probably need to speak with the applicant.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Is there a way we can get a copy of the final plat? Is there one available to us to look at instead of a half sheet, the whole document?
I don't know if there's one in the file, actually.
Angela, did you have a comment?
If you look in tab 8, I believe that's. I wanted to clarify I can clarify a couple of things. The property is zoned AG1, so there are no conditions of zoning in terms of required access. And it's my knowledge that, actually you can look at one of the other maps, the Owens Lake property is currently, does not have access to Birmingham, as you asked earlier, Mr. Cook.
Yeah. The plat, I think that's showing this access road is on Unit 2, and the tab 8 is for Unit 3. So we don't have the full plat.
Any other questions for staff? At this time, we'd like to invite the applicant forward to please present. And if you would state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it. Well, I hate to make things a technicality on a plat, but I just want to make sure we're looking at all the evidence just to make sure.
What do you think you're missing?
Normally, they'll have conditions of zoning on
This is AG1, so it wouldn't have had any conditions.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess that's what you're saying. And I don't know, normally there's typically a second page, but yeah, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I don't have a full copy. And I don't know what's been cut off on the top. I don't know what I'm looking at.
This is a good idea. I know they want to see the plan, but I don't know if we can allow everybody to come stand up here.
Folks, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you just to sit down.
We'd like to know what the guy's presenting.
I understand, but he's presenting to us. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
That's for you. It may just be a duplicate copy.
This is a little clearer.
But it looks like it's still cut off at the top.
I think it's, well, I don't know. This page has all the signatures.
This one's not cut off.
Yes, it's plat book, date.
The version that was attached to the application as Exhibit 7 is not cut off. It's small, but you can probably figure out if any of them are particularly zoning conditions.
If you look at the very top, I mean, it talks about Department of Development Service signature. There's something above that, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at everything that I need to look at.
Is this what you're looking at?
No.
No.
So I said,
We don't have
We
that.
don't have that.
Is there another page to that?
not specifically. Let's see if I've got another copy of it here before I break open this file. Are we waiting for her to get that copy? I do have another one.
We don't need to wait.
Yeah, I think
Let's go ahead.
keep on going.
Yeah, sir, go ahead and present. We can thank you.
multitask.
Thank you for your time.
No, I want you to have what you need. You want me to proceed?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, members of the board. I'm Doug Dillard with Wiseman, Nowak, Curry, and Wilco. We represent the applicant. We filed this appeal from a determination by the city that this subdivision plat should not have been approved because there's no dedicated public street accessing the property. We appeal their decision on two grounds. One, that ever since this property, known as the Owens property, the Owens Lake property, was developed by McCray and Stoltz.
Excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. Counselor, do we need to start the clock?
I've got it.
You've got it, okay, thank you. I'm
And
sorry,
I'm
sir, please go
going
ahead.
to try to move.
No.
Y'all been here a
I
long
wanted to-
time. I'm going to try to cut it short because I think rebuttal's more important than my presentation, okay?
Thank you.
But I just want to lay it out. We really got two issues here. One, is this a new street? And secondly, does the 50-foot requirement that's required by your ordinance, is it constitutional? Why do we have 50 feet on each side of the peripheral right-of-way, which is not defined, or in lieu of interparcel access, which is not defined? And ordinances have to be clear and succinct, and they've got to be interpreted in favor of the free use of property and in favor of the property owner. So what we have here, this is not the first time this issue's come up. It came up as a variance request in Fulton County prior to the incorporation of your city. That application was denied because they found that there was no hardship. That's not the object of our appeal here tonight. Our appeal here tonight is that, first of all, this is not a new street. And secondly, that the 50-foot requirement on each side of the peripheral property line, whatever that is defined to be, and or interparcel access, which nobody has defined, is unconstitutional in that it's vague and indefinite. Now let me show you. The plat that you referred to, which is the 2000 plat, and every plat that has been recorded on each phase of the Six Hills subdivision has shown this access, okay? This access is a 50-foot right-of-way into the property that is known as the Owens Tract. In the late 90s, Will Stoltz, and I've given you a letter from him that was written today, saying there was always their intent that this be a public road, and the easement that was recorded in the late 90s anticipated that this right-of-way, this access easement, exist until such time as it's dedicated as a public road. So at all times, when Six Hills was developed, all three phases, in all respects, always showed this 50-foot right-of-way, which was the only right-of-way that was required by Fulton County in the late 90s and early 2000s before you were incorporated for the dedication of a public road. As a matter of fact, in one of your previous applications tonight, you talked about 27 feet to back a curb, 50-foot right-of-way. If you look at all of the streets in 6 Hills, they're 50 feet. And which of them, if any of them, have a 50-foot setback in addition to the 50-foot right-of-way? When you got a 24 to 27-foot back a curb issue, why do you need 100 feet? It doesn't exist in the other parts of this subdivision, so why should this Owens tract be held hostage because there was no, quote, paved road into the property? There's not a plat that is recorded on the public records of Fulton County for any phase of this subdivision that didn't show access to the Owens tract as a 50-foot right-of-way, and the easement that was required, that was recorded, executed by George Bobo, and I've got an affidavit from George Bobo in the record, says that it will provide access to the Owens tract until such time as it's dedicated as a public road. And that was consistent throughout the whole development, and every property owner in 6 Hills had notice of this easement and had notice of the intention of the granting of that easement to provide a road into the Owens tract. Now, I ask you one other question. If it's not access, if it's not a public road, why can we develop 3 lots? That doesn't make any sense. Why? We're landlocked. Now, the question came up about the Birmingham dedication. There was a conveyance to McRae and Stoltz in 2001 for this phase that went to Birmingham Highway. That was later developed, and that Birmingham access was cut off because they didn't think they had to provide access to the Owens tract because they already had access. So there was no reason, aside from the expense of it, there was no reason to talk about access to Birmingham Highway because since the 90s they've had an access easement that was going to be dedicated to a public road as Phase 4. The Owens kept this property for their family use. As Mr. Stoltz said, they always intended to develop it. One of the reasons they did not develop it is because it had some rock and they were concerned about where it would perk or not. We got 23 acres here. We're asking for 14 or 15 lots on 23 acres. It's consistent with the AG requirements, and we think that the reasons for the denial are not well suited, first of all, because it is not a new road, and secondly, because the 50-foot requirement is excessive, and it's a taking of a valuable property. Can you imagine having this property? You got 23 acres in this neighborhood, and you can't develop it? Now, I understand why these folks don't want anything. You know, we always want to look at the pretty trees. We want to let it be like it is. You know, but the thing about it is the owners of this property who bought it in foreclosure, okay, have a right to develop it, and this is not a new road. And everyone in this subdivision that took subsequent to the recording of the plat that's been recorded in the Fulton Superior Court took notice of the fact that this easement was in place. And as a matter of fact, the Wombleys and the other property owner on each side took subject to all easements and deeds of record at the time they took their deed, at the time they bought their home. So for those reasons, we think that our appeal should be granted, and I'll reserve my remaining time for rebuttal. Thank you.
And stand there just a minute. Any questions from the board?
Just for the record, 7 minutes and 38 seconds on rebuttal.
Thank you. Any questions?
I only have one.
Go right
if I
ahead.
can. Sir.
Yes, sir.
You made a statement that the Birmingham Road highway, that was cut off. The reason there wasn't a concern about that is because the consensus was there was already access to that property through that other. Do you have any evidence to support that decision-making?
versus somebody making a bad business decision, to be blunt.
Well, you know, all I can say is there's no reason to think that we've got to run a road all the way to Birmingham Highway from this property when we've already got access. That doesn't take anybody a lot to understand that to run a road that far when I can run a road just in here and do a cul-de-sac and cut some streets versus going all the way to Birmingham Highway. That obviously is economic impairment. I do not know for sure.
Sure.
But all I can say is I don't think you can hold this piece of property hostage because there might have been at some point access to the Birmingham Highway when the city approved the Birmingham development without providing access to this property.
Right. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to open the floor for public comment. Please come forward. State your name and address for the board, please.
Angela.
I don't think the clock works.
Members of the board, good evening. My name is David Cooper. I'm here on behalf of the Wunderleys this evening. They are the owners of Lot 48 and 6 Hills, one of the lots by which Mr. Dillard's proposed road would pass. I do want to say that Doug and I have been working a long time together, and so I can speak confidently and with assurance that Doug speaks with great certainty. He is frequently wrong, but he speaks with great certainty. And he is wrong again tonight, my friend is. Let me address in sort of random fashion a couple of questions that have already been asked. Mr. Rickhook, you asked if there had been a calculation done of the rights-of-way as shown on the Phase 2 plat. The answer to that is yes. In the materials that we have submitted before the board, we gave you those calculations at tab 23 of our notebook. There's a very reputable surveyor in town by the name of Dan Conroy. He was hired to do those measurements because we anticipated that question from this board this evening. Mr. Conroy did the measurements. The right-of-way measurements exclude, let me be clear, they exclude the area that is in this access way. That is the same exact calculation that was done by the developer who platted 6 Hills, McRae and Stoltz. His numbers are the exact same, and if you run his math, which is shown on the in the box in the upper left-hand corner of that plat, his numbers, the developer's numbers, are completely congruent with the numbers that Mr. Conroy also tabulated independently, and we wanted you to have that information. There has been a suggestion that this land is landlocked. This land is not landlocked, and it is not held hostage. What we are here talking about tonight is the caliber or quality of the access that it does have. It enjoys access to Owens Lake Road. It does not enjoy street access to Owens Lake Road. It enjoys a driveway access to Owens Lake Road. That land is not landlocked. It may be developed consistent with what was represented by the developer of 6 Hills when all of these people that are here tonight to oppose this appeal, to speak in favor of the director and oppose this appeal, bought their lots. And we have submitted that information to you in one of the tabs in our booklet toward the end of the back, where it is clear that Mr. Stoltz and his sales team represented that this was not going to be a Phase 4 of 6 Hills. He abandoned that intention, which is an important word. He may at one time have intended to preserve to himself the right to go through there and develop a Phase 4. He did not act on that intention. In fact, it's clear he in fact abandoned that intention. The photograph that you've got on your easel is where Mr. Dillard's existing street is. It's heavily wooded, it's got a fire hydrant smack in the middle, and it's crossed by a fence. That is not an existing street under any stretch of the imagination. Mr. Dillard wanted to talk to you tonight about statutory construction. Let me offer you a couple of other principles of statutory construction that are relevant to your decision tonight. The cardinal rule of statutory construction is to ascertain and give effect to the intent of the lawmaking body that passed this ordinance. Irvin Company versus Brown, 228 Georgia Supreme Court, page 14. The language is to be given a reasonable and sensible interpretation in order to carry out that legislative intent. Hateville v. Anderson, 246 Georgia, 786. All parts of your ordinance, as interpreted by the director, relating to the same subject matter, must be harmonized, and each part must be construed in relation to the whole. DeKalb County versus Post Apartments, 234 Georgia Appeals, 409, a 1998 decision. In your case, you've got two pieces of the puzzle that the director was considering. There is 2392, which specifically addresses the issue of interparcel access, and it says it shall be provided if the director makes a determination that it is in the best interest of the public that such interparcel access be given. There was no such determination. Mr. Dillard cannot come forward tonight and show you that any such determination was made. Because no such determination was made, when the director is studying this issue, she says the exception to the 50-foot setback is if interparcel access is required. Well, interparcel access was not required by the director under the one provision that addresses interparcel access, which is given its ordinary meaning. And because it was not required, there is no exception from the 50-foot setback. Mr. Fricke told you, and it is true, and the materials are in our booklet that have been made a part of the record, this proposed roadway encroaches within that 50-foot setback. There is no getting around that. The way that Mr. Dillard and his client and his predecessor owners and their lawyers and all of them have tried to get around this is by speaking about abandoned intents. They then morph that argument to come to this city and say, well, there was a dedication of the street. The problem is, Mr. Recup, the math doesn't bear it out. The story doesn't bear it out, and neither did the mathematics. So it's not just David Cooper who rises and says the facts that have been presented by each applicant that has addressed this project are wrong. It's the mathematics, and I don't make those up. Mr. Stoltz made those up. He was the developer. It was his intent, and you don't need to ask him anything. We just get to look at the documents that he prepared and submitted in Fulton County, which are now being reviewed in this city, and they just don't meet the objective tests. And that's why this appeal should be overturned and the director's decision should be affirmed. I do not know how one looks at this photograph, goes by the property, and calls this right-of-way or an existing street. To the point of the right-of-way inquiry, board members, let me tell you that in Fulton County at the time, there were requirements that rights-of-way be paved. That did not occur with the subdivision. There is a hydrant in the middle at tab 11 of our book, as shown on the photograph. The Conroy measurements back it up. Mr. Dillard spoke about the Bobo affidavit. Mr. Bobo's affidavit is very interesting for what it doesn't say, as much as for what it does say. He speaks about this easement, but he ignores, in speaking about the easement, that there was a 2001 transfer of those easement rights back to McRae and Stoltz. And Mr. Dillard will take issue with me all night long and speak with assurance that it meant something else. But that deed, which is at tab 10 of your notebook, transfers all of those easement rights back to the developer. That transfer extinguished the rights of the Owens family in and to that easement. And it doesn't matter what form it took. It could have been another Exhibit A or another Exhibit B. In law, The plain meaning of that document is that that right to those easements was transferred back to the owner. And when that occurred, the owner was holding the same easement rights over its own land, which you can't do under Georgia law. What Mr. Bobo did not say in his affidavit was pretty interesting, too. He does not say that the plat that everybody's talking about affected this termination of the easements. The requirement that he cites to in that affidavit is that when a paved street is platted and built and paved, then it'll terminate. That did not occur. There's no plat, there's no paved showing a street, and there's certainly no paved street. The termination occurred differently. It occurred differently pursuant to the transaction document that is at tab 10 of your notebook. There's been submitted a report by Bill Huff. I love Bill Huff. We've all worked with Bill Huff before. I have respect for Bill Huff. Bill Huff got it wrong in the report that he submitted. It's replete with erroneous conclusions. He does not say, this is a land use planner whose information has been presented to this board as part of the materials that Mr. Dillard submitted. Again, what is not said is as important as what is said. The issue before this board tonight is whether the director's decision was clearly erroneous. The decision about whether a determination had been made that interparcel access was required. It was not clearly erroneous. There was no determination made. Mr. Huff, the expert land use planner that the applicants have put forth, does not say that it was clearly erroneous. He offers various other interpretations of other parts of your ordinance and wants to talk how it would be good land planning to allow this development. That ain't the issue before this board tonight. The issue before the board is whether the decision of the director was clearly erroneous, and it was not. Mr. Huff jumps to the conclusion that the Hay-Ashton Woods land is Phase 4, and he does that by citing to the fact that there's a deed that Ted Officer, one of the predecessor owners, held in which he labeled the entity by which he took title Phase 4. We've telephoned from this booth before. We were here in 2007 dealing with that entity, and it was at that time that we pointed out David Cooper can call himself Phase 4 of Six Hills. That does not make it so. Ted Officer and the predecessor owners can call themselves Phase 4. That does not make it so. And so tonight, the erroneousness of that proposition is echoed yet again in Mr. Huff's report, and he uses that as a key factor to try to justify his opinion to this board. He's wrong. Mr. Huff cites to some of the public record documents, but he doesn't address the fact that the easements were terminated. He doesn't address the fact that the math doesn't support the conclusion he urges. He doesn't address the fact that there's a survey before the board that is congruent with the mathematics on the plat. He does not address the relevant facts that support the director's decision. He does not address the fact that the Fulton County regulations at the time that this subdivision was platted required that easements which were in existence at that time be shown on this plat. Thank you, Paul. And so as a result of as a result of that requirement under the Fulton County regulations, which we've tendered to you, that easement had to be shown. And it was exactly that which it was called. It was called an access way. Mr. Rickcock, I believe you asked the question about terminology. It was called an access way. It was called an access way. The Fulton County regulations at the time that that Phase 2 was platted required that it be called a street and be given a name if it was, in fact, a street. That did not happen here. The Fulton County regulations at the time, you may be more familiar with them than I am, required at that time that the center lines of the streets be shown. That did not happen here. Every one of the factors by which the applicant and its predecessors have each time come forward address facts that they cannot support, and all of these other factors, which are highly relevant, completely undermine each application. The only difference tonight is the procedure that's invoked to try to get this new subdivision street approved. Procedure aside, they can't change the facts. Mr. Dillard is pretty good. I'm pretty good. One thing we're both unable to do, we can argue all night long. We can't change the facts, and that's what dooms his application. We'd very respectfully request that you support the director's decision and deny the appeal.
Sir, Mr. Cooper, hang on just a second. Sure. Any questions from the board? Yes, sir.
I appreciate the picture you showed here, but I can assure you that is not the way that property looks today. And I don't know, I'm seeing pine trees there and other things. It looked like it was cleared. It looks like someone planted some hardwoods along there, and I know they don't have their leaves on there, but I just want to make sure we're representing it correctly.
Let me speak to that, because your point is very well made. I believe you were on the board when I appeared in 2007. And you were probably aware, Mr. Rickhuck, that what happened following that hearing is that Mr. Officer and some of his lieutenants went out the day after the hearing, where he didn't get the relief, and he clear-cut the strip without a permit, and he was issued a stop work order at that time. The city had to come out and shut him down. My point in presenting to you the photograph was to show you the circumstances at that time, because that is the closest we're going to get to what depicts the circumstances of this alleged new street that plainly doesn't exist now, even in the stripped down condition, and it sure didn't exist then.
I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Yeah, I appreciate
That's
the
fine.
opportunity to clarify.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. At this time, the petitioner has the opportunity for rebuttal.
And he has 7 minutes and 38 seconds.
In all due respect to Mr. Cooper, I have the utmost respect for David, his firm, and his legal ability. This is not the first time I've heard the telephone booth comparison, and it's not the first time he's dialed the wrong number. This issue is one that's pretty simple. Now, one of the things that they argue is that the 2001 deed from the McRae and Stoltz eliminated the easement, okay? But the truth of the matter is, the 2001 deed conveyed the property as some 50 acres that was phase 2 here and part of phase 3. It did not in any way affect the Owens tract, and I know y'all don't have a title report in front of you, so you got to sort of take our word for it. But the merger that Mr. Cooper talks about, and I've got the plats and the deeds and the conveyances attached to this plat, and I'm willing to leave with you guys, was 50 acres that went on the northwest side of the property. It did not affect the Owens tract. And as a matter of fact, the Owens family kept that property in 2005, sold it to the predecessor of the officer group that was here before, and now Mr. Hay, who bought it in foreclosure from them. So this easement in the Owens tract, the 23 acres that is shown as the Owens tract, was never included in the 2001 deed, and that's supported by the letter that I gave you tonight from Mr. Stoltz. Now, that's all about a bunch of legal title search, but I'm telling you, so the merger issue is a non-issue here. What is the real issue is whether or not it was intended, this piece of property was intended to be a street. There's no question about it being an easement. There's no question about it providing access to this 23 acres. There's no question, as I understand it, that the city would permit a private drive for the construction of 3 homes on it. There's no question but that this property has no other access except by this, quote, easement that at the time it was recorded was intended to be a public road That's on the public records since 1999, and everybody who took in this subdivision took notice of the recording of that. Now, I don't know about the mathematical calculations that were contained in the plat that was recorded, but one thing I do know is that this easement was at all times and in all respects included on every plat that was recorded in the Six Hills subdivision. And under Georgia law, everybody who bought a lot in either one of the phases of this subdivision, under that final plat that you've got before you tonight, took with constructive and actual notice of the fact that this easement existed. And it existed for the purpose of creating a future public road. That was the reason it was there. Why else would you do it? If you didn't want to put a public road in there, you'd have said it was just going to be an access easement for the Owens family so that they could enjoy a home or two. That's not what was there. That's not what's on the face of the easement that was drawn by Mr. Bobo. It was always intended to be a public road. And the 50-foot peripheral requirement that is required to dedicate it as a public street, I submit to you, is unreasonable. Why do you need 50 feet, first of all? Secondly, what does it do? How does it protect the public health, safety, and welfare? And thirdly, and most importantly, how do you define it? It's sort of like Jerry Clower said one time when he was talking about buying a chandelier for the church. He said, well, can't nobody play it and can't nobody spell it. How do you want to talk about a chandelier when we need lights in the church? That's exactly what we're talking about here. There's an easement for a public road that everybody knew about, that everybody at all times have always known about, and the ordinance is so vague and unenforceable is it should not be held against this property owner to keep them from developing this property. Now let me read Mr. Cooper's side of your case. The Post versus DeKalb County case is a case I took to the Supreme Court in 1998. So I'm not going to argue about the finding therein since we were successful. However, I'm going to say that a case that's more in line is Jekyll Island State Park Authority versus Jekyll Island Citizens Association, 226 Georgia, 152, a 1996 case which says, an ordinance must be definite and certain to be valid. And when it's so vague and indefinite that men of common intelligence must necessarily guess at its meaning and differ as to its application, it violates the first essential of due process of law. Why should we try to guess whether or not we've got the right to have a public road pursuant to this easement when it says at the time of the granting of the easement we're going to put a public road in there? This is not a new road. And we submit to you that the 50-foot requirement is unreasonable, 100 feet on each, got a 150-foot swath there. That's ridiculous. And we got to do that in order to put a street in. I submit to you that we're entitled to a 50-foot road. We're entitled to have this plat approved, this subdivision approved, and we respectfully request that you grant the appeal. Thank you.
Sure. Sir, will you stay here just a second? We just have a quick question
Just
for you.
one question, sir. When Mr. Cooper, I apologize. He made the point of Fulton County law back in the 90s that if it's a street, it's called a street, and it had a certain definition to it in terms of it being paved, etc. Is he incorrect?
No. No, I mean, the street is not in. The street, I know that's hard for you to accept, right? The street is not in. You know, the dedicatory intent was there, okay? But it's not a street until it's accepted by the local government,
Did Fulton County call streets, and I'll put in just in air quotes, streets before they were actually built?
Yeah. Yeah, at one point, this property was not taxed by Fulton County because it was shown as preserved right-of-way for a street. Now, it's being taxed now. But at one time, back in the 2000s, it was not taxed as a street because it was shown as a street. But the issue here is Fulton County approved the plat, the subdivision plat, showing each phase of the subdivision. Their ordinance says at all times would not allow them to leave a piece of property landlocked. Their subdivision regulations, just like yours, will not allow us to subdivide a lot and leave it in a landlocked situation. This easement kept that from happening. Well, if they accepted the easement on the plats that were given, they had to accept the easement on its literal terms. And the literal terms of the easement said it's granted until such time as a public road is put in. And the county accepted the fact that its future dedication and construction of a roadway was sufficient with a 50-foot right-of-way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to close the public hearing. Any questions to staff or council? Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, we've got an access easement. Is that correct? Is that what we have here? And it's going to access the property. Is there, how many houses could go on a private driveway? Is that what we're talking about? That there could be potentially a private driveway? Yes. Is there also a requirement that it has to have a certain amount of minimum road frontage to be subdivided?
Yes.
Could there be a hearing also where there's zero lot frontage?
Each lot has to have at least 35 feet of road frontage. So as it stands now, he can put, I believe, one house back there.
Right, because I heard 3, and that's what confused me. I thought that you had to have a certain amount of minimum road frontage, and I don't understand it, and I'm just trying to understand what could happen here, and what are we leaving here tonight with? We know that we've got some 24, 25 acres, 23 acres back there. Something's going to happen with it.
But let me ask a clarifying question. I believe it was Mr. Cooper who said that there is access on the back side of that lot to another street?
Sir.
Sir, no. Thank you.
There isn't right now. I think when this plat was originally approved, that Owens Lake property did have access, but I think it's been subdivided.
So it no longer
since
does?
then, and it no longer has access.
Okay, great.
Right. So it's back to, minimum amount of road frontage.
Right.
And of course, whoever owns it, they could come in for a variance. They could ask for 100 different items. And, be it a private road with 0 lot frontage with,
Well, you can't ask for a lot with no road frontage, but they can ask that the 50-foot distance between a new road be waived.
Okay. And be it a private street or driveway, does it still have to meet a 50-foot rule?
A driveway would not, a right-of-way would.
Okay. So if it is a 50-foot driveway or access, then
It would not need the 50-foot between the property lines if it's a driveway.
and could it get a reduction in the front building setback, or not front building, from the minimum road frontage?
You can't
requirement?
reduce the 35 feet, no.
Cannot. Sure. Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions to staff? Do we have a motion?
I'm going to ask a question. Counselor?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
This will not be favorable to people out in the audience, but I'm still going to ask it. If we wanted to defer a decision until next month so that we're able to further study the materials that have been presented to us, are we afforded that opportunity?
Let me check a few locations to see if there's any impediment.
Okay.
One of the problems is we've got a number of piece of information. I'll be honest, I haven't been able to read during the hearing because I wanted to listen to what the people are saying. And I know it makes it very difficult for us.
And even the map, I can't read this.
Mm-mm.
It's just too tiny.
That's the first time they make a presentation. But a lot of the stuff he gave us, I have a great stuff on that. Just do it now. That may be the right answer, but
No, I
I wanted to ask the question.
And I didn't get through as much as I could with that big part.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got everything else from last meeting. I've got that.
To come back. Well, here is Section 64, 1943, provides that Mayor, City Council, Board of Zoning Appeals, and Community Development Director, in considering applications under this article, which this falls under, shall do one of the following: approve or partially approve, approve and impose conditions related to the application being considered, deny, and here's what you're asking: hold for further study not less than 30 days. And approve. Less than 30 days.
Not less or?
Not less, so you may hold for further study for not less than 30 days.
Is our
Wait,
next
I think our
meeting-
next meeting falls on April 22nd, which is more than 30 days.
So we'd have to have a special meeting in between?
No, it is.
Oh, not less, excuse me, I'm sorry, forgive me.
I'm personally 100% against this, of deferring this.
If we get a motion on the floor to,
Sure.
before discussion too much.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to deny the secondary variance by 6 Maples and to accept the decision by the City of Milton. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion.
I'm concerned about the landlocked aspects of it. But the question I asked Mr. Dillard was did somebody make a bad business decision here? And you know what? My gut is that's what happened.
And I think they did as well.
And should we be held hostage as a city or a neighborhood be held hostage for somebody's mistake?
I agree wholeheartedly.
And that's, but I'm not convinced based on, because Walt, similar to you, I've driven by that, looked at, said, yeah, it sure as heck doesn't look like a street to me. Now, to the argument whether the 50-foot is constitutional, I mean, I think there's a stare decisis argument that says, you know what, that's what it is, and we need to stick to it. So that doesn't carry the weight as much as if you look at everything that we have today in Milton, whether it was Fulton County or Milton, it's not that narrow, not as an entrance to a subdivision. You may get a small side street that's narrow, but that's not the main artery going in and out.
Yeah, I think you could build a street, no problems, on the remaining lane that's left there. And the question.
As a primary access?
As a primary access. It's, in other words, if there was a street that was put in ahead of time, had they not put a paper street or access road, I think that's something. And I understand what you're saying. I think they have a marketing site plan that shows this. I think for whatever reason it was colored over so it didn't indicate that it was a road.
Sure.
There's 3 or 4 issues that kind of cloud this whole issue. And I understand, how do we interpret the 50-foot? Does that mean anytime we have any subdivision, do they have to keep it 50 foot from any adjoining piece of land before they could put a driveway in or a road in? And just certain things make it confusing at best. I think what we ultimately need to do is vote and then let it go to court. And
No, that's not how it
and
goes.
I
We
hate
don't
to
need
say
that.
that, but I don't think I'm smart enough to understand all the laws and pertinent laws to everything. And I think there are some legal cases here that are going to be made, and they're made every day in my household. I always lose. So I just feel like there's some real decisions here that are probably beyond us. And I kind of agree with you, Chairman, that we need to make a
I
decision
disagree
and
with
move
that.
on.
I disagree with.
Rather than defer.
I disagree with
Yeah,
that.
I don't
Yeah.
think,
Yeah, I don't think we need to defer.
No.
Votes, yeah. at this
Okay,
point.
then,
I personally don't think it was ever designed for street. I really don't. That's my personal opinion. I only get one vote. But I just don't think it was ever there. And I think we've done this so many times, and not just us, but Fulton County, and there's a lot of people that just,
this is not the first time.
they just don't think the evidence is there. And you're probably right. They probably need to take it to the next step if they think that it was there. But any other discussion before we vote? All in favor of denial of the secondary variance for 6 Maples, raise your right hand. Opposed, same size.
We still have to continue.
Any old business?
Yes,
None.
sir.
Any new business?
Guys, please, I'm sorry. Folks, whoa, whoa!
We have
We're not
to
done.
wind up, I'm sorry.
Hang on, just give us a second, we'll be done.
Give us 5 minutes and we're done, and you can
Any old business?
talk as much.
Any new business?
Mr. Chair, new
Pardon me?
business, I wanted to remind you of 2 things. We have a volunteer appreciation lunch on Saturday, March 29th. I think I've heard from 1 or 2 of you, so if you could RSVP via email to me
Okay.
for that, I would appreciate it. And also, the mandatory board training has been set for Saturday, May 17th at 9 o'clock.
Will that be
9
here?
to what? Was it?
1:30, I think. And lunch will be served. It'll be here.
Paul's going to be here, right?
Yes.
You got to suffer with us, my friend.
I won't be here till the word.
Well, Ken, I think. I'm sorry.
We need to make a motion to adjourn. Any new business? Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
I second it.